When we look at the race for the Senate, these two men essentially faced off back in late 2020, early 2021, at which time I remember calling it for Schumer on account of the fact that back then Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn were roaming around his ascendant. And even as the runoff election was happening in January, Pluto was still fairly close to that ascendant. And that is in fact what happened, also because in the case of McConnell, Saturn then was further back in Aquarius, and so was Uranus in Taurus. So the Uranus-Saturn square was challenging his Venus and Mercury. Venus for sure, Mercury shortly thereafter, and the Moon very possibly, because that's the range where Saturn and Uranus were active. And although he might have an Aries moon if he's born early enough in the day, the odds are good that based on just the amount of time that is available on that day to be born, so to speak, the odds are better that it would be in Taurus. So therefore, there was a lot of pressure to those early fixed planets, Aquarius and Taurus, Moon Taurus. Now we've got Uranus later in the sign, and same with Saturn. And so now Saturn and Uranus are actually putting pressure already on Mars, in the sense that Saturn has been there already. In fact, it got as far as Saturn itself, and even this Uranus, it got pretty close in the summer. So effectively speaking, this Saturn is challenging these Taurus planets, and Uranus got as far as 19. It's not quite there, but I'm inclined to count it as well, being a very important planet and forming a square in the sky. So essentially, these planets here are getting a lot of pressure now. So in a sense, it's very similar to what happened last time. The Jupiter position opposite McConnell's Neptune isn't particularly helpful because he's a Pisces, therefore Neptune is the co-ruler. And when I also add on to that the fact that in astrology frequently you get a better sense of how something is going to turn out by gauging where the planets are going in upcoming months, as well as where they've been in previous months, because that's how planets move. You get retrograde motion, and they do a kind of dance around certain degrees. And notice that Schumer has early Sagittarius planets, and Jupiter has already done a trine to the Sun and Venus twice. Once in May, when it went by and trined them both. Then it recently retrograded in October and again made a trine to these planets. It didn't quite get as far as the Mercury, but certainly the Sun and Venus, which are very important planets, the Sun being always potentially the most important planet in a chart, and Venus, ruler of his zenith sign, and therefore very important for career. The thing is, Jupiter, as we go to vote, is in late Pisces, so it's not making an aspect to these planets. But in the sense that it's already been there, then in that sense it is making the aspect, and certainly as we move into the new year, it'll be in Aries, therefore trining these planets. So, bottom line, when you add the favorable Jupiter positioning to the fact that Pluto is now on the ascendant even more than was the case in 2021, of course subject to the exactitude of his birth time, but either way it's likely to be very close to this angle. My sense is that this continues to be an empowered period for Chuck Schumer, and therefore, even though I will admit that without a birth time, it is possible that McConnell may have an ascendant or midheaven that could perhaps save him. But absent that, and the odds of that aren't great, I would call this race for Schumer and the Democrats.